Picture this. It's July 17th, 1944. A massive, catastrophic explosion just tears through the naval base at Port Chicago, California. In a single instant, 320 men are killed. Hundreds more are injured. It goes down in the history books as the worst home front disaster of World War II. An open and shut case, right? Just a tragic ammunition loading accident. But what if that official story isn't the whole story?
It all kicks off with this one, single, cryptic sentence found on a mysterious document, a sentence that compares the mushroom cloud of a theoretical atomic bomb to the explosion at Port Chicago. You heard that right. This one clue would launch a decades-long investigation into what really happened that night.
Now, you'd think a journey to uncover a secret like this would start in some top-secret government archive, right? Well, nope. It starts, of all places, at a church rummage sale in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
So, fast forward to the spring of 1980. A researcher named Peter Vogel is just sifting through some old photographic supplies. At the bottom of a box, he finds an envelope, and inside is a single folded piece of paper, a document that would completely change how we see the Port Chicago disaster and set Vogel on an absolute quest for the truth.
Okay, so this wasn't just some random memo. The title, The History of the 10,000-Ton Gadget, was a direct reference to a scientific model of the plutonium implosion bomb. I mean, this was serious top-level Los Alamos stuff. So the question is, what on earth was a direct reference to a supposedly conventional ammunition accident doing in a document about the atomic bomb?
And this is where things get really interesting. Because that one little line, typical Port Chicago fashion, it creates this massive contradiction with the official history we've all been told.
See, on one hand, you've got the official story, backed by a naval court of inquiry, a terrible but conventional accident involving TNT. But on the other hand, you have this scientific paper from the very heart of the Manhattan Project that just casually compares an atomic bomb's fireball to the one at Port Chicago. For researcher Peter Vogel, there was just no way both of these stories could be true.
And here's why. It all comes down to basic physics. Vogel knew the thermodynamics were just completely wrong. A chemical explosion, like TNT, it burns at around 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and it glows this reddish-orange color. An atomic bomb, though, its fireball hits about 1,000,000 degrees Celsius and radiates a brilliant, blinding white light. It's like comparing a campfire to the surface of the sun. You simply cannot compare the two, unless Port Chicago wasn't a chemical explosion at all.
So at this huge red flag, Vogel started digging. He went all the way back to the original evidence from 1944, the court transcripts, the eyewitness accounts, all of it. And what he found was a whole series of anomalies that just didn't add up.
He zeroed in on three key things that witnesses described: a brilliant white flash, a really strange donut-shaped cloud, and a level of destruction that just seemed to defy the amount of explosives that were officially on board.
First, so many eyewitnesses reported a brilliant white flash. Think about that. Observers at Hiroshima use those exact same words. That white light is a telltale sign of the insane temperatures you only get from a nuclear reaction, not the reddish-orange glow of TNT.
Then there's this incredible piece of testimony. An Army pilot flying miles away told the naval court he saw a donut-shaped ring whoosh out from the blast. This is a perfect description of something called a Wilson condensation cloud. It's a really rare phenomenon that you get when a massive shockwave moves through humid air, and it's a signature seen during nuclear tests over water, like at the Bikini Atoll.
And finally, there was just the sheer scale of the damage. Based on his calculations, Vogel argued that the energy released was way greater than what the 5,000 tons of munitions could have produced. I mean, a lot of those shells would have just burned or been thrown, not contributed to one giant blast. The math just didn't seem to work.
Okay, so the investigation kind of shifts gears here. It moves from physics to people. Specifically, why were the top scientists and officers of the Manhattan Project so incredibly interested in this particular accident?
Let's talk about Captain William Deke Parsons. This guy was the Navy's top ordnance expert attached to the Manhattan Project. Just days after the Port Chicago explosion, he traveled all the way from Los Alamos to the scene to personally write a report. A year later, he was the guy arming the bomb on the Enola Gay. And the year after that, he was supervising the nuclear tests at Bikini. This is not the kind of man who investigates routine accidents.
So this is the million-dollar question. Why did Parsons and the whole Los Alamos laboratory show what was described as an inordinate interest in this event? Why was a top-tier atomic bomb expert sent to write a detailed report on a so-called conventional explosion for his commanding officer who just happened to be on Roosevelt's atomic bomb policy committee?
And this is where the story takes another turn. Because beyond the physics and the high-level people involved, Vogel's research started to uncover this trail of really strange events that, well, they look less like coincidences and a lot more like a deliberate cover-up.
In 1980, Vogel managed to show his rummage sale document to the famous physicist Edward Teller. Teller's reaction? It wasn't scientific curiosity. He supposedly tried to claim it was a typo for Port Arthur, Texas. When Vogel pointed out it clearly said Port Chicago, Teller's response was just chilling. I will deny ever having seen this document, and I will deny ever having spoken about Port Chicago with you.
Then there's this, which is just bizarre. For his research, Vogel had been using an unclassified Army-Navy report on the disaster from the 40s. In 1982, he publishes his theories citing this public document. And almost immediately after his article comes out, that 40-year-old report is suddenly reclassified as top secret. Why would a mundane report on a WWO accident become a state secret 4 decades later?
And the list of weird things just keeps growing. A declassified Los Alamos document mentions that records for 2 specific railroad cars at Port Chicago were destroyed. A film of the explosion, which the Navy later said was just a simulation from the 50s, was shot on nitrate film stock, which went out of use in the early 50s. The ship that blew up, the E.E. Bryan, had its cargo booms specially upgraded right before the disaster, making them just strong enough to load a 10,000-pound bomb. And to top it all off, Vogel's own home was broken into twice, and the only things taken were his Port Chicago research files.
So let's just take a step back. When you pull all of these different clues together, the rummage sale paper, the physics, the high-level interest, and this trail of suppressed evidence, what kind of picture does it really paint?
Well, according to Peter Vogel, it paints a picture of a secret nuclear test. He argues that you've got a document from Los Alamos making a direct link. You have physical evidence on the ground that looks just like a nuclear event. You have the direct involvement of the Manhattan Project's top weapons guy. And you've got a decades-long pattern of behavior that really seems designed to hide, deny, and suppress this whole alternative history.
The official story has never changed. Port Chicago was a terrible, tragic accident. But the questions raised by that single sentence on a piece of paper found in a cardboard box, they have never really been answered. Was it all just an incredible string of coincidences? Or was the worst home front disaster of World War II actually the secret, unacknowledged dawn of the atomic age? The mystery endures,